Welcome to A Taste of AZ podcast, where we interview everyone from James Beard award-winning chefs to local mixologists, winemakers, breweries, and so much more. We've got an awesome episode lined up for you today. But before we get into that, head to atasteofaz.com so you can subscribe to our quarterly magazine and email newsletter to find all of the best places to eat and drink around town. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Now let's get into the episode. Well, hello, A Taste of AZ listeners. Today we are at a pretty new spot that I've been very excited to get to for a variety of reasons. Maybe primarily among them, how many wonderful things I've heard about this place. But I will let our guest today go ahead and introduce himself and where exactly we are.
Yeah. Hey, Luke. My name is Hunter Rogers, and I'm the owner and founder of Pizza to the Rescue on 26th Street in Indian School.
And what exactly is Pizza to the Rescue?
Pizza to the Rescue is, of course, a restaurant with the sole purpose of helping support a neighboring dog rescue.
Okay.
So the name kind of has a double meaning. Of course, sometimes you just need a piece of pizza, you know, if you're feeling hungry or whatever, and it comes to the rescue, but also the pizza helps to save puppies. So it part of the proceeds from the pizza sales go directly towards the dogs.
And we'll dig into that relationship definitely more deeply throughout this conversation, but give me the quick rundown of the menu here. I figure there's lots of pizza on it, but is there anything else on the menu?
Yeah, totally. It's a full menu. So we start with some cold dishes. We've got everything from grilled beets that are chilled to Caesar salad to a goat cheese salad. To some boquerones, which are a personal favorite of mine. They're like marinated white anchovies on grilled bread with a little garlic and a little tomato. Then we kind of move into some hot dishes, appetizers. We've got our kind of famous now grilled meatballs. They're really incredible. They get grilled over an open fire, so they have that little bit of crispy smokiness to them. And then they're finished off in a cast iron pan in our super hot oven. So those are obviously a staple and have become quite the hit. And then we have a bunch of homemade pastas. We make everything in-house every single day. That was kind of one of the things that I wanted to do from the get-go is keep things pretty simple, but cooked, kind of traditionally, just like you would if you were, you know, doing something at home or if you have an Italian grandma, something like that.
Sure.
So I wanted everything to be made in-house. And done, you know, with not much flair, but with a lot of kind of authenticity and integrity in the food. So all of our ingredients, you know, we source from the best possible purveyors we can locally, and the stuff we can't get locally, we get from Italy. Some stuff you just can't replicate, like a legitimate Parmesan cheese, and you know, a few other things. Our artichokes are imported from Italy. So the things I think that are really important do come from outside of Arizona, but Arizona has amazing produce as well, and you know, amazing ingredients. So we utilize that too.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting as you roll through some of those items. Who doesn't love pizza, right?
Yeah, right.
And Phoenix, really kind of Arizona overall, even if you head up to Flagstaff, has a pretty good pizza scene. But I don't know that I've ever seen Spanish anchovies on a menu, at least at a pizza place, that is. And it's interesting,
well,
too.
Well, there's the problem.
Yeah, exactly, right? I love boquerones, and I've had them at Paula, and I've also had them as a piece of nigiri at Uchi up in Old Town. And it's funny because everyone's always like, anchovies? That's a crazy thing to order. But they're like... they're more tame than you would expect them to be.
Yeah, they're not like the super salty, fishy, like kind of black anchovies that everybody expects to be an anchovy. It's a totally different experience. It's a marinated white anchovy. It's kind of pickled or vinegared, and it's a way more mild flavor, served cold with a piece of grilled bread and a little garlic. It's very traditional in Spain and Mediterranean dish. So not necessarily Italian, but you know, we're flexible here.
Sure. Well, and I think it's interesting too, because like I was saying before, that's not really something I've seen on the menu at a pizza place before, but it sounds like, you know, wow, I don't know that upscale is the exact word to describe this place, because that gives almost a sense of like fine dining or something like that. But that is definitely a more, trying to think of the right word to describe it, but it's a unique menu item to see at a pizza place. Is that kind of how you wanted to build your menu out, as something a little bit more upscale, if that's a word you would use?
I would use the word kind of eclectic. So
Okay.
the Boccherones traditionally are kind of a, blue collar working man's food in Italy. Or in Spain and in Europe. It's not. They're kind of presented in a fancy light here in the U.S., but really when you go over to Spain, it's like, the construction workers are eating these things on their break. So it's not intended to be an upscale food. Somehow I guess exoticism of it in the U.S. has made it that, but really they're almost like a simple snack food to be eaten with a little piece of grilled bread, sitting on a park bench or in a tapas bar. It's not anything that needs to be overly plated or overly decorated. I mean, how we do it here is we lay them out on a plate. We drizzle a little olive oil, a little lemon juice, and a little kind of crushed red pepper flakes, piece of grilled bread, and a piece of grilled tomato. And that's all you get.
Sounds delicious.
That's all you need.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll circle back to the menu in a little bit here, but tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of how you ended up here.
It's life's a bunch of twists and turns, right? So I was not in the food world professionally. I worked in a French kitchen here in the Valley in high school and in college in the summers, just to gain experience because I loved food and I loved cooking and I wanted to learn. I kind of in high school became obsessed with Anthony Bourdain and his show No Reservations and his books and his speaking and all that. So that just made me interested in food. It made me realize that there's so much more to it than just eating it,
sure,
basically. And then when I went to college, I moved across the country, and all of a sudden I had none of the foods I grew up with. And I loved Mexican food. My mom makes Mexican food, and I grew up with a family that made a lot of Mexican food. We're 4 generations from Arizona on my mom's side, and my dad's from Wyoming and New Mexico. So we grew up with a lot of Mexican food. And when I went to Baltimore for college, I didn't have Mexican food really available. So I was like, well, you know what? I feel confident I could at least try to make some in my little dorm kitchenette. So I started making salsas, and I, would start making, burritos and trying to make carne asada on my little grill thing in there. And just that sort of led to my roommates getting involved, and they were passionate about watching Bourdain too. And, Baltimore is kind of cold and dreary and not a great place in the middle of winter, at least for an Arizona guy. So it was kind of a distraction. And finding new restaurants in Baltimore that, a college student could afford was also a fun adventure as well. So it helped kind of take me out of the 5 degrees and snowing sideways and bring me home a little bit. So that was where the passion kind of started, and the realization that I could make myself good food that I wanted. And then that led to exploring other cuisines that I really enjoyed, and, various Asian culture cuisines and French and Spanish and Italian and everything. So that kind of opened the door a little bit.
And so at this time, as you're developing these skills and this passion, is there an undertone of like, maybe someday I want to make this into a concept of some sort, whatever that may look like?
At the time, certainly not. I was going to school. I was pretty focused academically and athletically, and kind of had my eyes set on, a career in business pretty early on. So pursuing a career in food or culinary never was really on the table. Not really. I didn't even consider it seriously until the pandemic hit. And then obviously I think a lot of people can feel this, but over COVID, everybody kind of took a big look in the mirror and reflected on where they were at and what they were doing, and if they were happy in their careers or if they were ready and willing to kind of take a leap into the void a little bit. So during COVID, I worked in finance for about 6 or 7 years in Los Angeles, moved back to Arizona, was working in kind of branding and brand strategy for a little bit, which I enjoyed, but I kind of wasn't in love with it. And I was, obviously when the pandemic hit, I was cooking ferociously. My girlfriend and partner, her mom at the time was dating Chef Christopher Gross, who is a James Beard Award-winning chef. So we were kind of wedged into a house together for a few months with nothing to do and a lot of stuff to cook. So
I bet that was a pretty good time.
That was a really good time. Yeah, like we'd wake up and be like, okay, what are we going to do today? Okay, we're going to do like a bone-in schnitzel and do every single thing from scratch.
Wow.
And drink, 12 German beers by 3 p.m. doing it. So, fun stuff like that was happening all the time. And really, I had the realization that, okay, I not just want to be in food and cuisine and hospitality, I need to be here. And we had this empty warehouse, kind of sitting here wondering what to do with it, and walked through it with kind of a different perspective and just felt like it just needed to be a restaurant.
Sure.
And the concept kind of came from that. We're right next to the dog rescue, a couple 100 feet away, and not even, maybe 50 feet away. And I loved making pizzas at home, and I didn't have a pizza oven or anything. I would just kind of jerry rig the oven that I had and get it as hot as I possibly could for like an hour and on broil, and got a slab of metal and just started experimenting with ferment times for doughs and watching, billions of YouTube videos on how to do it. And got pretty good and pretty proficient at making, Neapolitan-ish style pizza in a home oven. And nobody was complaining about me trying either. So there was a lot of willing participants in the experimental phase.
Sure.
So that together with the dog rescue being here and the space being available, it kind of naturally, the idea of, hey, why can't we make a restaurant that serves pizza and benefits the puppies? Like that, to me at the time, was like an aha moment. I was like, that's a no-brainer. I love pizza. I love puppies. I feel like there's a good amount of people out there that are the same.
Absolutely. And I don't want to bury the lead here, pushing the pizzas and puppies aside for a minute, but I can't pass the conversation about basically, being around Christopher Gross, and, it sounds like the cooking that you were doing, at least initially, was less about, okay, we're going to refine this skill set to make it into a business, and more so just like, we got nothing else to do. Let's make some food. I mean, you talk about, bone-in schnitzel and things like that, but what is it like cooking with, next to, and for someone like Christopher Gross?
You better be fast.
Yeah.
Which works because he's extremely fast, and he loves, obviously loves cooking, but, with a guy that has 40 something years in the kitchen at the highest possible level you can achieve, things happen fast, and you better be ready for it. So, chopping, nothing happens slow. If he sees you doing anything slow, he'll just take it over.
You can take Christopher out the kitchen, but you can't take the kitchen out of Christopher.
Absolutely
right?
not. And he's left-handed, so if you're chopping next to him, he can just like reach over and stab you if you're doing anything wrong.
I wouldn't put it past him either.
No, nor should you.
And so during that time, what variety of foods are you cooking? Because I mean, his culinary experience and whatnot, of course, probably nose note depth might be a actually reasonable way to describe it.
Yep.
Are you picking up things throughout that experience, or just kind of having fun?
Totally. Well, it's kind of funny. So where I, quote unquote, learned to cook, at least, fundamentally, professionally, was at Vincent's restaurant. Vincent actually catered my parents' wedding back in the late 80s. And Christopher at the time was Vincent's sous chef. So it was kind of like a few degrees of separation already there. And so Christopher, worked for Vincent as well back in the day. I did, much later on. So we had some of the same fundamentals, I think. Obviously he took, he showed up to Vincent's with a lot of skills and knowledge already, because he'd worked in Paris and he'd worked in London and he'd worked in Europe and abroad and in Los Angeles. I showed up to Vincent's doing nothing and peeling potatoes and killing lobsters and cleaning mushrooms and stuff like that. So we were very different positions, but it was still really cool for me to kind of work for Vincent and learn, how to make a beurre blanc. I didn't even know what a beurre blanc was. How to make a apple tart, very, very simple things in the beginning. And then it kind of progressed after the time, and learned how to make, many of his kind of famous signature dishes. And then that, once you kind of have that foundation in French cooking, which I barely have, but have had experience with, it really opens the door to basically doing anything.
Sure.
It's just, it's kind of the fundamentals.
Well, and from what I understand too, French kitchens are much more about the organization of the kitchen, or not necessarily more, but as much maybe about the organization as it is about the food itself, which I think is a great precursor for running a restaurant, especially with someone who then develops a business background as well.
Totally.
And I find it interesting too that you're like, yeah, I mean, I was just like working with Christopher Gross, learning how to cook there, and then you don't go in that direction at all. But obviously food has a very deep connection to you if it's looped you back in so many years later.
Definitely. Absolutely it has, yeah.
And so circling back to the pizza and puppies. So did you have, some sort of relationship with the rescue before you had opened this place?
Definitely. So Jerry Hormel, who's my longtime girlfriend and partner, started the rescue, I want to say 12 years ago.
Okay.
Kind of in her backyard, just with a single litter of puppies. So she was volunteering at the Arizona Humane Society. She's always loved animals, as do I. And when she was in high school, she started volunteering at the Humane Society, just doing whatever she could. She just wanted to be around as many dogs as possible. So after kind of volunteering there for a year or two, she wanted to sort of branch out and do her own thing. She said, I'm ready to start my own maybe foster care, which is what it started as, and take in some of these dogs that are the rescues. Basically, the Humane Society is overflowing with stray dogs in need. And with her level of compassion and love for animals, she said, okay, I'll start taking some that are overflowing. So she started with dogs that were on the E list, which is, the ones that will be put down just based out of, there's a lot of different variables, but a lot of the times it's just space needs. So she started taking those in. And after a while, she learned that there was a whole subcategory of dogs in need at these shelters that were being underserved just because of lack of space and funds and everything, that were the pregnant stray dogs, or the nursing moms. It's not just one dog at that point. It could be 10 or 12 dogs that need a lot more attention and a lot more work and resources. So that's kind of where she started with Almost There. She had a little kind of dog house in the backyard, at her parents' house, and she turned that into a little mini foster care. And she would take in a pregnant dog, kind of see the mom dog through the birthing process, get the puppies, spayed and neutered, get them vaccinated, raise them until they're about 8 weeks old, and then adopt them back out through the Humane Society. So she did that, and then the Humane Society kept asking her for more help and more help and more help, and it grew from 1 litter to 2 litters to 5 litters, and she built out the backyard bigger and bigger, and added more kennel space and more fencing and more stuff until she grew to the point where she couldn't do it by herself anymore. So then she hired her first person to kind of help her out and had a lot of volunteers helping her out. And fast forward to now, she has a full blown rescue of her own, Almost There Rescue, that does I think they save about 700 dogs per year.
Wow.
So, the snowball effect was real and the need was real. And now she has partnerships with not just the Arizona Humane Society, but the Maricopa County shelters, the Yavapai County shelters, the Pinal County shelters.
Wow.
Shelters all over Arizona, which is her focus is Arizona, rescuing dogs.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so were you with her from the beginning of this journey?
No, I was not. She, when we started dating, Almost There was more mature than it was in the beginning, but not really what it is today. So somewhere in the middle.
And that's interesting too, because I would think kind of intervening at that, phase of a dog's life essentially, and making sure they get spayed and neutered, and then assisting in getting them adopted would be maybe one of the most important, phases to kind of jump in there. And I was unaware of that component, but of course it makes a lot of sense that would be a thing. So very interesting. So circling back to this place, when you guys are developing it, what kind of creative process did you go through to come up with the menu and the design and all of those components?
The menu for me is a combination of all of the things that I like, basically Italian food, and that my friends and family like when I, make it for them at home. So basically it's an amalgamation of home cooked meals that I like to make, from experiences. I really didn't discover Italian food until I went back east for school, and kind of learned about Italian deli culture and kind of real old school East Coast Italian restaurants from Baltimore to New Jersey to New York to, Washington, D.C. But I never had chicken Parmesan before. I'd never had spicy rigatoni alla vodka before. You know, there's a lot of eye-opening moments throughout college where I was like, this is the best thing I've ever eaten in my entire life. Probably had that happen 100 times.
Yeah, really?
So, and then, you know, traveling abroad, traveling is probably my favorite thing in the whole world to do. And I think a lot of the menu reflects that, and the changes to the menu will constantly be reflecting, you know, new discovered dishes. I'm going to Italy in November, actually on a really cool kind of masterclass course trip with Massimo Bottura, who's the chef of Osteria Francescana that was the #1 restaurant in the world a couple years ago. He's holding like a 4-day masterclass in Bologna, which is where his restaurant is. And
wow,
that'll be really cool to learn from him and just meet he's like an icon. He's a kind of a hero in the culinary world, and has such a cool approach to food and what's beyond food, really. So
sure.
So that, you know, stuff like that, for inspiration and constant evolution. I think for me, you know, the restaurants, you know, they're never carved in stone. They're always evolving, and I think that keeps it fun for us and for our guests and for our kitchen. And you know, I think that that's how I like to approach life as well, I think.
Sure. Well, it's interesting to me because you clearly have a deep passion and interest in food and the culture around it, and I imagine the history and all these different components, but you're not, like, when you're spending time in the kitchen, it seems like it's more so on a personal level than it is here. Would you say that's correct?
It used to be. Yeah, I was cooking every single day at home. Since the restaurant's opened up, I've been here, you know, obviously a lot, but no, the passion is stronger than ever. And in fact, it's, you know, having the restaurant kind of up and running, it's really opened a lot of new doors for me from a perspective standpoint on, okay, what can we do next? Where can we go next with this? Kind of approaching it from a bit more of a professional standpoint and a restaurant standpoint versus like a home cook standpoint.
Yeah. So another menu item that jumps out at me is it's the 40-layer short rib lasagna. Tell me a little bit about that.
So yeah, I love lasagna. Who doesn't? I wanted to kind of do it in a little less traditional way, and wanted to kind of pack as much flavor and goodness into the lasagna as possible. So we make it a little bit differently. It's 40 layers, and we kind of layer it in a big pan that we make it in. It's not a baked lasagna at first. We kind of we cook all the ingredients and then build it together and let it kind of settle and sit. And then when we serve it, we kind of cut it off of this like mother lasagna, basically.
Oh, okay.
I can show you some photos, or some videos of how we make it. It's really interesting. And then kind of lay it on its side. So all the 40 layers you can kind of see from the top looking down. And then we bake that in the pizza oven at, you know, super hot temperatures with kind of a truffled Parmesan Mornay sauce on top with then a tomato sauce as well. So it's kind of got it all. And it's good. It's a fun one. It takes 2 days to make though.
Wow.
So we make one a week. And when we run out, we run out. But it takes a full 2 days to make because we braise the short rib for about 8 hours. And then we have to like shred that. We have to reduce the short rib drippings into a sauce. It's a whole song and dance, but man, it's the final product is worth it.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the type of cooking that gets me excited because, you know, not that I'm the guy making pizza dough. I've made pasta dough a few times, but that's definitely a labor of love. But when it kind of transcends multiple levels, I'm not going to be braising the short rib that long and then making the sauce out of it and then doing all that. And so I think that, at least for me personally, is what I really enjoy seeing at restaurants is like these dishes that transcend anything that I would ever attempt to cook myself.
It's slow food. You know, it takes a long time because there's no shortcuts. You know, there's no shortcuts really in braising short rib.
Sure.
It needs to be done slowly. And the pasta, you know, our sheets of lasagna pasta are made by hand. So like it's all kind of part of the process. And I think I know you can taste the difference. I can taste the difference.
Yeah. Well, it's like, that's really how flavors develop, right? And like you mentioned, letting it rest. There's certain things that only time can do for food.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm definitely going to have to come in and try that lasagna
We're
sometime.
ready for you.
Let's get a quick break in. A real quick reminder, head over to atasteofaz.com and subscribe to our email newsletter. Also, subscribe to A Taste of AZ magazine and get it shipped right to your door. Now let's get back into today's episode. Alrighty, so we touched a little bit earlier on kind of the seasonal component, and you mentioned how you source local things, but when you really start digging into this menu, it begins to speak volumes about kind of how much that means to you. For instance, when I look at the Carpaccio pizza, you see Terra Farms Wagyu from up in Prescott area. When I look at the Wood Grill, and I see Two Wash Ranch chicken,
Yep.
there's things on here that are not just, okay, we got some local microgreens or something like that. They're real solid representations of kind of the pinnacle of what Arizona food can be. Talk to me a little bit about building that stuff into your menu and what you're kind of looking for and how you find these people.
Well, for the Carpaccio pizza, that was an idea that I was kind of brainstorming with Christopher over the pandemic, well before the restaurant was even in the concept phase. Just like, why can't we make a Carpaccio pizza? It's a crazy idea. I don't know what we were drinking at the time, but it must have been good. But it was something you hadn't really seen before. And I loved Carpaccio and just grilled bread, and it's all the same thing. It's just just repurposed almost. And that concept kind of was slowly developed into what it is today. And I think it's one of our favorite pizzas. But to kind of speak to the local kind of purveyors and ranchers and stuff like that, the people at Terra Farms are like my favorite people. Chef James Porter, he was in town for a long time. He moved up to Prescott to kind of run and manage and cook at Terra Farms and Manor, which is a super cool concept up there. It's like a fine dining staycation bed and breakfast place with a full-blown Wagyu cattle ranch and Iberico pork farm and farm with all their own seasonally grown local vegetables, and they grow all their own flowers that they have in the place. It's just a wild concept, and they're onto some groundbreaking stuff. And just luckily I got to meet Chef Porter and build a relationship with him over the last almost decade, and was personally buying his beef throughout the years just to cook at my house and for my parents, and on special occasions, and just fell in love with the product. It's an incredible approach to raising cattle and sort of that regenerative agriculture mindset. And they've done a wonderful job, like nobody else in Arizona, at least that I know, where, they've got 100% Miyashima Japanese Wagyu genetics, and they're intermixing that with American Wagyu genetics that they've been raising. And they started with 2 cattle and then 10, and then they're at maybe close to 100 now.
Wow.
As their kind of reputation is growing, and it precedes them as it should. So really, truly, I'm a huge fan of beef. I've had the opportunity to travel to Japan and Spain and Argentina and try the product there. And this is as good, if not better, than anything I've ever had. So I'm very proud to serve it. And I'm really excited about kind of the future of Terra Farms and where their cattle ranching is going, because it's kind of a true tribute to the American West and Arizona, and the process of kind of always bettering themselves, and always raising the bar, judging against themselves, because really that's the only people they can compare themselves to. So yeah, big fan of that. And same with Two Wash Ranch. Dave's awesome. I have chickens at home and love chickens, and love serving chicken and using eggs and all that. So and I think, again, when it comes to Arizona producers, there's nobody better than Two Wash Ranch for extremely high quality chicken.
Well, it's interesting too, because Arizona has such a long-standing agricultural history, but with the extreme growth that Phoenix and really the whole state has gone through, it feels like that's kind of been lost a little bit, because there are so many transplants, me being one of them, but being here for, most of my life, I've been able to experience it. It's interesting how, your family has kind of a long-standing history here. And now this is almost, among other places, but it's almost like a bastion of Arizona and a representation of what we really have to offer. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I think, you look at a place like Terra Farm and Manor, how much more of a resource could you really ask for when you're trying to represent Arizona in a culinary facet than an incredible chef who is raising his own cattle and doing everything completely from scratch?
It's like the Holy Grail. We're just really lucky to have that here.
And what is the...
I would probably be serving beef without them.
Sure.
Honestly.
What is the flavor profile on the Carpaccio pizza?
Oh man. So, you have the pizza dough, which we bake in the pizza oven with nothing on it. So it's kind of like almost like a pita bread style cook. And then we pound out the carpaccio, lay it on top of the warm dough from the oven. And then we put a really interesting kind of arugula salad on top of it with kind of this caper Parmesan vinaigrette that we created. So it's got that kind of fresh salad, kind of the fresh arugula with the acidity and the bite and kind of the saltiness of the capers and the richness, umaminess of the Parmesan on top of the carpaccioed beef on the pizza dough. So it's a really interesting experience.
It sounds like a roller coaster of flavors. I definitely have to come in and try it sometime.
Shy.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine so, right? You're doing Wagyu on a pizza. It shouldn't be. So yeah, we've kind of talked through, the food menu is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's small, but it's not, like a cheesecake style,
Definitely
a
not.
Cheesecake Factory style menu. And I think that's how it should be, right? Especially with the level of local producers that you're working with, and just kind of the ideology of Italian and Mediterranean food in general is very, fresh food driven. Talk to me a little bit about your beverage program.
Yeah. So food's one thing, but it's not a proper Italian restaurant without some proper beverages, right?
Absolutely.
So we have an awesome beer, wine, and spirits program here. I think that was creating the menu was probably the most fun part besides designing the space. But I think then building out the spirits program was an exceptionally fun and unique and creative endeavor. When you start with a blank slate and you've tried to fill all the gaps that you need, it was quite fun. But so this is kind of a segue into the wine part of the menu. I guess we can start there as an Italian-ish restaurant. I had been fascinated with wine for a long time, and just out of plain old-fashioned curiosity began reading a lot on wine, and then started reading not just for entertainment, but almost like studying it for no reason. And got to a point where I felt like my knowledge was good. To the question came up, like, could I do anything with it? Should I do anything with it? So again, in talking to Chef Christopher and meeting a few sommeliers around town at the Wrigley Mansion, when their wine program is like the best in the valley, maybe the Southwest and maybe the entire West Coast. I don't know. They have the cellar there is incredible. And just talking to the various somms that have been through the Wrigley over the years, got interested in potentially pursuing sommelier certification. So kind of fast forward to 2022, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to sign up and do the level 1 and just see how I do. Because of COVID and the Court of Master Sommeliers took COVID very seriously, they were only holding like 1 or 2 of their certifications per year at that point, and you had to do it in person, obviously. So I signed up for the next one. That was the only one available for the next, 10 or 12 months. And it just happened to be in Mexico City.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, cool. I've never been to Mexico City before. Like, that sounds like an interesting idea. And we'll just see how it goes. So signed up, and I went down there and took the introduction, which is the level 1. There's 4 levels. And I think I got every single question right on it. And nice. It was a fully immersive 2-day experience, and it was like so eye-opening and so mind-blowing. I was so kind of inspired by and impressed by the master sommeliers that kind of led the intro candidates through the course, that I was like, oh man, I gotta keep going with this. So after passing the exam, I was kind of chatting with one of the lead masters that taught the course, and she kind of mentioned to me, she's like, hey, we're doing the certified in 3 days. If you want to like sign up now, we don't generally do this, but since you did well on the first one and you came all the way here, like we'll let you take both.
Sure.
So I said, absolutely. I had not prepared for the certified sommelier exam. I had zero service experience, which is a part of the exam where you basically walk into a room, you get a 30-second spiel from a prompter of what the specials on the menu that night were and what a wine flight would look like and what a price point would look like. And they kick you into a conference room with 8 master sommeliers sitting around a fake dining room table, and they start rattling off questions and asking you for pairings and advice and all the stuff a normal sommelier would experience. And that was a very unique thing for me because I'd never done that before. And then ended up taking the written portion as well and the tasting as well, and felt very confident in those 2 sections. So ended up kind of accidentally passing both of them in a long weekend and getting my certified sommelier kind of credential, which then now just a couple weeks ago, I was in Dallas for the advanced, which is the level 3 out of 4 course, which was like a 4-day hyper intensive, working really hard course, starting wine at 8 a.m. with tastings all day long. So it's super fun. And that was led by, I want to say like 40 master sommeliers and 200 people, and you have to test in to get invited and all that. And it's kind of intense, but also extremely awesome. And all the people that I met there are incredible. So the wine thing for me is just a huge passion that's now turned into a menu for this kind of restaurant. So long story short, the wine was a big focus for me. I love Italian wine. I think 98 or something % of our wine list is Italian.
Okay.
We have just under 100 labels. Which
is quite an expansive program for a smaller restaurant.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as we kind of start getting our name out there and getting more regulars in and start introducing the wine, enthusiasts of our area to what we have in stock, it'll become a bigger, more interesting part of our offering. But right now it's kind of a bit of a secret.
Sure.
Which is just fine.
Well, and it's like, how do you compete with pizza and puppies?
Right.
I mean, it's like, you gotta, like I was saying,
message,
you don't want to bury the lead.
Yeah,
I'm sure you do have a wonderful wine program, but pizza and puppies is going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, we call our wine book The Good Stuff, and it's, a couple pages, and it's kind of broken down by regions in Italy, and it's really fun. There's some really interesting and unique wines. There's some absolute kind of home run big boy wines in there. And there's just some extremely delicious value wines that you can drink every single day. So it was fun kind of building out a balanced list and representing various regions of Italy based on some of the regional cuisine that we serve here too. So that was really cool.
Yeah, well, and it's one thing to have a good cocktail list, but a expansive wine and spirits list that is really finely curated is kind of more my thing, because I love a nice cocktail, but a nice glass of bourbon or tequila during the summer or whatever it may be, that's kind of what I enjoy personally. And you guys have quite an expansive list of, like I was saying before, not just wines, but tequilas, bourbon, scotch, mezcal. Your liquors and cordials and aperitif list is an entire page, which is funny because it's bigger than like the whiskey and gin combined, I think. But hey, that's not a problem.
We like to get
me.
Weird.
Yeah. Is there a wine on your menu that you think kind of maybe it's a favorite of yours or something that it symbolizes what your wine menu, like the mentality behind it?
Man, that's a really tough question. So
especially with how big your wine menu is. Yeah.
Well, I think the first where my brain goes initially is to our Terranera, a Sicilian wine. Prior to putting this menu together, I hadn't really had much Sicilian wine. I'd kind of written it off. I tend to lean more towards cooler climate, old world wines like, Burgundy and Alsace and Champagne and, certainly in Bordeaux and all that, but not to me in my head from the little wine knowledge that I had was, okay, Sicily, that's really south. That's going to be really warm. Those are going to be big hulking behemoth wines, kind of like the ones that I don't like in Napa. So I'd always stayed kind of towards northern Italy and Tuscany when learning about Italian wines and enjoying Italian wines just, from my personal palate.
Sure.
But I had been reading more and more about Sicily, and then as we started to build out the wine list, I was doing different tastings with different wine and beverage representatives in town, and Sicilian wine got put in front of me. I was like, okay, well, we'll give it a shot. Why not? And I was completely blown away for the price point and the quality and just how damn delicious it was. It opened a whole new world for me in wine that I didn't know existed.
That's part of the fun too, right?
Absolutely. Oh, and now I'm like an absolute advocate for Sicilian wines, the white wines, the red wines, the Nero d'Avola, the Nerello Mascalese. Just like, come on, just give me more of it. And as I've learned, those were entry level Sicilian wines that I felt like were probably worth 5 times what the cost was. And then I kind of moved up the ladder and was like, okay, so this is amazing. Like how high can Sicily go? Like, where is the peak? Like, so it was kind of fun tasting with our reps at RNDC and from Wilson Daniels that imports some of Sicily's best wine in the U.S. The pinnacle of Sicilian wine, and it, I can tell you, as like an unbiased, like kind of with very limited knowledge on Sicilian wine, it is as good, if not better, than a lot of the top name Barolos at the same price point.
Interesting.
Which also blew my mind. I was like, do I want to tell people about this, or do I not want to tell anybody about this and buy and drink all of it?
Yeah,
myself?
You're shocking the market with it. You're raising the prices for everyone.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's through this conversation, it's very evident how much of your personal passion has made its way into the menu. And it's not just, a guy that likes to make pizza. It's someone who has really invested in educating themselves, even if this isn't the path that you thought you might go down for a portion of your life. And I think, alternative educations and whatnot are part of the things that really infuse new ideas and a new take on a restaurant or whatever the project may be. An alternative education brings freshness to it. And I think that kind of reverberates throughout your menu, but it still nods to the classics. And like you mentioned, you like those old world wines. I'm sure you can experience some of that, but then you can also, like we were talking about the Boccherones and your new take on the lasagna. It provides a very unique menu to kind of taste your way through, wonderful food of that region, but then also you're saving puppies at the same time.
Exactly right. Yeah. And that's kind of the whole point. Do something a little different. I mean, I think the whole purpose of this place is a little different than any other restaurant in town, at least that I know of. So it kind of opened the door for doing the food a little bit different and doing
absolutely.
Like we have 150 different spirits, and many of those are tequilas and mezcals. I know I'm not the only person here that loves tequila and mezcal. So, and I think that you're
not the only person at this table that loves tequila and mezcal.
Well, and I think especially with mezcal, that's like, you can almost approach mezcal like you can wine, like Burgundy almost, because there's 27 different agave varietals in mezcal, and they're all like hyper regional and single estate. So you can kind of, the concept of terroir in Burgundy, you can kind of approach mezcal. You do approach mezcal in that same way. So we've got some, extremely interesting mezcals, extremely interesting tequilas, a lot of interesting rums. I'm a huge rum fan. I don't know if rum's like that popular yet. It was, and then I think Captain Morgan kind of killed rum for a little bit, but rum is an extremely interesting spirit as well that at least for our generation hasn't really had its time in the sun, so to speak. So there's some really interesting rums that we have. We got a couple incredible cognacs. We even have Louis the 13th. Like, what kind of pizza restaurant has Louis by the half ounce or ounce offering? So there's some like crazy fun stuff too in there that's just more like almost experimental.
Sure.
But maybe we'll find our audience there, but it's sort of like, here it is. If you want, a margarita pizza and an ounce and a half pour of Louis the 13th, like, we're your place.
Sure. Yeah. Someday I hope to be in that tax bracket where I'm enjoying pours of Louis the 13th with my pizza. Yeah. But yeah, I think, like you look at mezcal and it's like you make the parallel to wine. And I think that's a very astute one because it's almost like even more wine than wine, which you're like, what do you mean by that? But it's like, wine, they grow the grapes in one season and then boom, it's done. But these agave plants are going for a significant amount more time.
5,
and so,
10, 15, 25 years.
Yeah, the terroir is almost even more distilled into it, if you will. So do you guys have like a happy hour or dinners or anything like that outside of your normal kind of business schedule?
We do. We have happy hour every day.
Okay.
and we are planning.
Hopefully Louis the 13th is on there.
Absolutely, yeah. That's at the top of the happy hour.
Yeah, right.
list. And then we're actually planning a super fun dinner. So I guess I just like all spirits, but with High West.
Okay.
They're kind of a whiskey distiller, an old Western whiskey distiller, the look and feel out of Park City, Utah. Many people already know them. They're incredible. I've been a fan of High West for about 10 years, and they're not that old. So you can kind of say from the beginning of them, and just watching them grow with their offerings and as a business has been really impressive. But so we're kind of joining together on a whiskey pairing dinner here on September 18th.
Okay.
We haven't announced that. You're the first person that I've told.
Oh, breaking news.
High West was just in here yesterday, so we've sorted out the 5 different whiskeys that we're going to pour. We're going to make a cocktail with one, and then the other 4 are going to be kind of paired with a dish, served neat, and also in a cocktail or prepared within the dish. So we're still kind of sorting out the kinks with that menu, but I think we're going to sell maybe 40 seats, hold it in the dining room here, and have representatives from High West kind of talking through the whiskey pairings and the coursing. And I think it's an extremely cool concept to pair whiskey with Italian food.
Sure.
And it'll be on a Wednesday. On Wednesdays we do the Terra Farm steak, so there will be a Wagyu component obviously to it. And to me, whiskey and Wagyu is like bread and butter. So
sure.
that will definitely be a feature on the menu. But we'll be releasing more details about that as it kind of comes up. But looking forward to that, and that'll be our first sort of endeavor into the sort of like paired set dinner. We haven't done that yet, but I see a really bright future in that with our various wine producers like Gaia, the Gaia family. We could do a Gaia wine dinner, which we're kind of in the early stages of talking through that one. And there's a lot of interesting things. We could do a tequila dinner. There's a tequila that I've had recently that their reposado, I swear to God, it was like Parmesan. Like it had a Parmesan-y, like the main note to it was Parmesan. I was like, okay,
interesting.
I'm sold. Like this is going somewhere. So, that's been kind of the part of the fun explorative process of where we're at and where we hope to go.
A little bit of that with the cacio pepe.
Oh yeah.
That sounds bomb.
Absolutely. You read my mind.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because I've seen more and more people kind of beginning to embrace the spirit forward dinner. It started with wine dinners, and then you get some beer dinners and maybe some cocktail dinners. But I think just tasting menus in general, if you are someone who loves food, there's, in my opinion, no better way to really experience food than having someone curating every single thing that you're drinking with every single thing that you're eating, and the level of intention that you guys put into not only the concepting of dishes, but then the sourcing of these products. And I mean, like you were saying, Wagyu and whiskey, it just sounds absolutely delicious. each one on their own sounds good. And so combining them in a way that is very thoughtful is something that I always enjoy. And of course, they're, a little bit higher price tag than just going out to dinner. But in my experience, and, all of my foodie experiences, which is quite a long list since we've started the magazine, every single one of my favorites tends to be tasting menus. And I think it really gives chefs a unique opportunity to flex their muscles. And I think the same thing on the beverage side, because, when somebody's just ordering a bottle of wine, you don't really have too much control outside of giving them a recommendation.
Right.
And I imagine a lot of the time people don't take those recommendations.
You'd be surprised. People here are really great.
Yeah.
Especially with our wine list kind of being pretty foreign, and also foreign, but also, having this many wine options at a pizza restaurant, people aren't necessarily used to that.
Sure.
So generally they're very receptive, and we've had a really good result from the wines that we've recommended based on the food that people are ordering and interested in. But I think to your point about the kind of coursed out pairing dinners, I think it's interesting, at least for me, because it involves a lot of trust from the guests, and they're because you don't really know what you're getting into necessarily.
Sure.
Usually you kind of keep the menu fairly secret or elusive or general, because you want to surprise guests. You want to, you kind of want to wave your left hand and kind of surprise them with the right
Divert
a little
them,
bit, to keep it fun and interesting. And also, I mean, for me, the big point of these pairing tasting dinners that we're going to be doing is sort of like adding some perspective, new perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, how can we find a flavor? And now High West, you know, they've got a ton of different whiskeys. They're not a one-trick pony in the slightest. So how can we find something in let's say a Chardonnay barrel aged 5-year-old whiskey that they make? How can we pair that with something and find some unity there?
Sure.
And then share that with our guests and have them experience it too. I think that's really cool. And that's going to kind of be a mainstay thematically for these.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, just going off of that specific whiskey example, it's like maybe you are, you know, trying to be frugal and you don't want to spend whatever it is, $50-$80 on a bottle of Chardonnay barrel aged if you have not tried it before. But that is definitely a component that I enjoy about tasting menus as well, is or, you know, pairing dinners, is you often find things that you never would have purchased before.
Totally.
And then they might become one of the favorites in your repertoire, and that really speaks to the curation of a menu like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And luckily for us, High West is going to provide us with a bottle that they will not have released at that point either. So for the High West fans out there, that'll be a cool experience to try I don't know how much I can say, but it is a cask strength bottle, which is new for them, because now they have enough of their own distilled whiskeys going back for a long enough time to where they're able to do that offering, which is super cool. So we're really excited for that.
That's very exciting, and I might have to get myself a ticket to that dinner.
Go.
Awesome. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Is there any other things that we haven't touched on that you feel are a major part of your guys' story?
I think we did a pretty good job. I think you'd mentioned sort of the seasonality a little bit. I think we're really looking forward to the fall. I'm a huge fan of kind of foraged mushrooms.
Okay.
My grandpa was a big mushroom hunter after he retired, and it sounds funny to say mushroom hunter like they're running away or you shoot them.
They might be, but I do.
They are elusive, and you got to know.
There was the one guy that goes, and Haifa Foods.
Yeah,
he posted
we
a
get all our
video
mushrooms
of the
from
mountain
Haifa.
lion. Did you see that video?
Yeah.
I mean, you might be being hunted.
It
when
could
you're
be a
searching
full
for 'em.
contact sport, mushroom hunting. You never know.
Right?
But Arizona is kind of world famous for morels and lobster mushrooms. So coming into the fall, we'll be absolutely utilizing that natural Arizona product. And lobster mushrooms are extremely interesting too, because you can't fake them. You can't replicate them. It's actually two mushrooms combined into one that only happens in the wild in certain times of year in certain environments. So we will be absolutely doing some fun stuff with that in mind. So
when will that change happen, do you think?
Probably around late September.
Okay.
We're dependent on, the monsoon season and a lot of kind of factors coming together as to when exactly the fresh lobster mushrooms start popping up. Sometimes it can happen as early as August, depending on the year, and sometimes maybe as late as October. So we're not quite sure on the strike zone yet, but we've got our ears to the ground on when that's going to come up, and Haifa's, a great purveyor for us. So
Sure.
we will be getting amazing lobster mushrooms and doing something with that. So stay tuned.
Well, thank you so much for your time again, and what a cool place you guys have here, and I can't wait to see what you continue to do in years to come.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yep.